I would like to introduce our next speaker, who will actually be coming to us in a pre-recorded format in the same way as we did with Chris Hardy this morning. We're particularly grateful to Maya Abram for stepping in rather late in the planning for this seminar to present on the significant Taronga project in Christchurch, which we heard about earlier today. And it's also a project from Schmidt-Hammerlassen, which was mentioned by Annie. And as we also heard, it was the first significant civic building in Christchurch to be built after the devastating earthquake. Maya has a creative background. He is a creative writer and an art curator, and he's also currently the manager of Maori and multicultural activities at Taronga in Christchurch, Aotearoa. And so we'll hand over to Maya.
Papa ki tōranga tai ki mau wau I whakanukunuku hia I whakaneke hia. I whiuarere ho tū awa hinurua ki te wai ki tai uwi ki tai wawa ki te whai au ki te ao marama ti hei mauriora. A ko wai au ki te taho tōku māma, ko maua te maunga, ko tauranga te moana, ko mātātua te waka, ko ngai te ringi te iwi, ko ngai tamawhari o te hapu, ko te rere atu kāhia, te marae. Ko tamawhari o te wharenui, ko purukamu tōku whānau, ki te taho tōku pāpā, ko tai arahia rawa ko taranaki o ku maunga, ko ohine mataroa rawa ko waitōtara o ku awa, ko mātātua rawa ko Aotea o ku waka, ko ngai tūhoi rawa ko ngā rauru kītahi o ku iwi, ko te māhurihuri rawa ko hine waiata o Ngāti hine waiata o ku hapu, ko rewa rawa ko te ihupuku pā o ku marae, ko kura mihirangi rātou ko te rangi moaho, ko kawera o ku wharenui, ko Abrahama tōku whānau, kei te mihi katika ki ngā mate, kei wainganui a tātou I hui mai nei. Koutou kua whiturangitia haere atu rā. Kei a koutou ngā kaiwhakarite o tēnei kaupapa, e mihi atu mō te tono mai a hau ki te kōrero mō tēnei kaupapa ko tūranga nō reira, kei te mihi. Kei ngā kaimahi o tēnei mahi I mua I au, ngā tangata hei hanga te ara I mua I a au ki te mahi, taku mahi nō reira aku, ko tēnei aku mihi ki a koutou. Ki te whare e tūnei, hei manaaki ki ngā mātauranga, ngā raumi, ngā taonga kei roto rā, ngā tangata katoa, ko tūranga e mihi atu. He tohu koe ki a tātou katoa ki te mana o ngai tua huriri, ki te taone nui o tautahi no reira kei te mihi. Ko tōku mahi, kei ngā ki te wānanga o tautahi, kei o tautahi Aotearoa nei, ko au te kai whakahaere o ngā rātonga Māori, ko Maya Abraham tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everyone, my name's Maya, and it's my pleasure to be presenting to you today, although not in person. It's still a great opportunity, so thank you for having me. I hope that what I have to say still contributes to the seminar and what you'll be discussing, but I'm really excited about tūranga and what I'm going to be talking to you today about. Although I can't be there in person, being able to sit here and talk to you about tūranga on the land that it was built just grounds me, and it feels it feels good. And that's not to say that this kōrero or this these stories that I'm going to talk you through can't travel and they don't make sense outside of their place of origin. But it's more to say that the narratives I'll be talking about today have a deep and intrinsic connection to this land in Christchurch. Just a bit more about me before we get into the presentation. I'm of Māori whakapapa and descent, particularly in the North Island of New Zealand. My mother's connections are to the iwi of Tauranga Moana in the Bay of Plenty. This is also the area that I grew up in a small town called Katikati that was dubbed, or probably more likely self-appointed, the Mural Town of New Zealand. And my father has connections to iwi on the opposite side of the island, on opposite sides of the island. Firstly, to Ngaituhui on the eastern side, affectionately known as the People of the Mist, but he's also affiliated with Ngāroru Kitahi, who have ancestral ties in the southern part of Taranaki in the west. My experience has been in the wider glam sector as I worked in galleries and museums, particularly as a curator, mostly investigating the stories of Māori artists and communities through taonga Māori and visual arts. But making the move into libraries has been quite a natural transition for me to continue this investigation around identity, as well as the responsibility of libraries to care for and facilitate access to taonga, as well as to tell the stories of this place. Currently, I'm the Kaiwhakahaere Ratonga Māori, manager of Māori Multicultural Services at Ngāki Te Wānanga o Ōtautahi Christchurch City Libraries. I manage a team of highly skilled specialists who work across the library service, from service delivery, collection management, programming, and event management. We're based in Christchurch, and over the last 12, 13 years, there's been efforts by the city to reshape, reorient, and rebuild since the devastating quakes of 2010 and 2011. This was a challenge for the council, but it also provided an opportunity for Ngaitahu, and particularly the Hapu sub-tribe of Ngaitoa Huriri, to reassert themselves as key people in the identity of Christchurch. There's been a sustained effort from Ngaitoa Huriri to integrate traditional knowledge and narratives into the built environment of the city in a way that is not only authentic and meaningful, but is cohesive and interrelated. This means that from one site, building, or park, it's all a part of the grand plan to reclaim the city through storytelling. Tūranga, no surprise, is and was a large part of that network of stories mapped out by Ngaitoa Huriri at the beginning. It was also an anchor project for the city, which meant that it was expected to draw people back into the central city and provide a rich cultural experience for people returning to the city. It was also a critical point for Ngaitoa Huriri to speak authentically on traditions and narratives that are uniquely theirs, but how to communicate that through the design and build of tūranga as well. As a council, we're committed to engaging well with our treaty partners, the mana whenua of this land, the ancestral and traditional owners of this place, Ngaitoa Huriri. Unfortunately, I wasn't involved in the design, planning and build of tūranga. However, I've drawn on some colleagues and ex-colleagues' experiences of the work, as well as all the documentation that has been created to tell the tūranga story for this presentation. Ngaitahu are the largest iwi or sub-tribe who have mana whenua in Te Waipounamu, the South Island. They're made up of 18 hapu or sub-tribes who support the development of families and communities on a local level. One such hapu is Ngaitoa Huriri, who have mana whenua over much of Canterbury, and particularly Christchurch City. Ngaitoa Huriri are centrally located in a township just north of Christchurch called Tuahiwi, and that is where the engagement happens. no matter the size of the project or organization. And this aspect is very important as it allows for the stories to be told in the place and with the people for which they were intended. For tūranga, this was managed through the hapu entity mandated with ensuring the built environment of Christchurch post-earthquake was a celebration of mana whenua. They were called matapōpore, and they were tasked with working alongside councils to ensure that tūranga was imbued with a story that is considerate of the narratives held here. And I just wanted to point out some key people that were a part of that project. Lynte Aika is one who gave advice and guidance around the cultural narrative, around the language used, but also how it will be presented through the design of the building. Kerry Whaitiri was a part of the design team and was very aware of the power of narratives influencing design elements. And everyone at Matapōpore who worked on the Tūranga project were really committed to telling the story of Ngāi Huriri. Internally, there were also many working to ensure that there was adequate consultation with mana whenua to tell their stories, such as Paula Rigby, Aurelia Arona, and Erica Rankin, to just name a few. The name Tūranga does a remarkable job of communicating many complex ideas simultaneously. And this is a feature of language that particularly Te Reo Māori is good at. It brings together multiple interpretations and allows you to understand a meaning, no matter your comprehension of that language. To quote the project sheet created by Matapōpore, tūranga is a name that carries with it considerable responsibility. Tūranga speaks of whakapapa across generations, connections to the north and out to Moananui-a-Kiwa in the wider Pacific. Tūranga is the name of a settlement located on the east coast of the North Island. It is the homeland of Ngaitahu ancestor Paikea, who made his way there on the back of a whale from the ancient homeland of Hawaii. Paikea had two sons, Whatiua Te Ramarama and Tahu Pōtiki. Ngaitahu descend from the union of Tahu Pōtiki and Hemo, and that is where we get the name Ngaitahu from. This highlights and celebrates the origin stories of Ngāi Huriri and Ngaitahu as a whole. It's a reminder to all of us of our history and that the journeys to get us all to where we are is important. Ngāi Huriri have taken this opportunity with tūranga to bring us right back to the beginning. This name Tūranga also has significance as the location of the building in the northeast corner of Cathedral Square carries a connection to the surrounding narratives, and this from the grand narratives of Christchurch. Tūranga is close to several sites of cultural significance and adjoining anchored projects including Whitirea, Cathedral Square. The stories told within these anchor projects are interrelated, and it was important that Tūranga connected to those stories. For this reason, the grand narratives produced by Dr. Te Maire Tau and others helped guide the rebuild of the city and provide the foundations for integrated works that carry cultural emphasis, such as tūranga. So the power of storytelling and the passion from Ngāi Huriri to re-indigenize the city is beginning to weave together these buildings in a tight, familial embrace. At another level, tūranga has more general applications to the common speaker of te reo or just anyone using the name tūranga. Te Aka, the Māori dictionary, says tūranga is a noun. It means to stand, position, situation, site, foundation, stance. So it's quite a strong word that implies a steady or fixed position. To some, there might not be a parallel to draw from here for a central city library. However, it can be interpreted as a call to action for those entering tūranga. For me, it's asking you to investigate your foundation, your stance. Do you know your foundation? Can the library help you with your stance? Can tūranga help you with your stance? Where do you stand? All adding to the layers of meaning. Moving inside tūranga, through the doors, you're welcomed by the karanga or the call of welcome into the building. This is a direct statement of care for all those people that walk in and journey with us through tūranga. The design was created by artist Morgan Matthews Hale and is quite fitting for many reasons, but particularly as females perform the karanga and initiate the welcome process in Māori tradition. The design is one that Morgan continues throughout tūranga, and some of the imagery and patterns are repeated. The first place this is continued is around the lift surrounds as one of the forms of transport through the building. A beautifully designed wrap hugs the walls and depicts mahinga kai, food gathering practices of Ngaitua Huriri, with its reference to navigation, natural resources, and most importantly, birds of significance. This artwork is called Mātauranga, the Ascent of Tāwhaki. And as the artwork page on our website says, the installation uses imagery relating to the journey of Tāwhaki through the heavens to obtain knowledge or mātauranga. On each floor of tūranga, the design references a different bird and visually depicts the journey that Tāwhaki took as he climbed up through the heavens, and each floor can be seen as the different levels to the heavens. Also, because the natural environment for many of these birds is the forest, then as you travel up tūranga, you can acknowledge the different floors as the different layers of the trees in the forest. The birds in this artwork are the pākura, the pūkeko, which is in green, the titi in orange, the kakapo in the red, the tui in the purple, and the kukupa or keriru in the blue. The emblematic of the natural environment and how it holds mātauranga, or knowledge that we are guided by. The birds, as travellers, are flying towards or on a journey to discovery, searching or looking into the unknown, much like the visitors to the library. In the main atrium of tūranga is one of the central figures of the cultural narratives, Tāwhaki. He stands proudly on the stairs, looking out across the ground floor, welcoming those into the building, embarking on their learning journey. He's also halfway up the stairs, as you might notice, and this is to indicate that he's going on his journey up through the heavens. Te Maire Tau says about Tāwhaki narrative of Ngaitua Huriri. The myth of Tāwhaki established the structural framework in which knowledge is retained and transmitted. Because Tāwhaki sought, returned with, and established the core principles of knowledge and whakapapa, tohunga, who held tribal traditions, modelled themselves on Tāwhaki, and it was this group who compiled the oral traditions of Ngāi Tahu into written form in the last century. The materials used for the sculpture are a combination of steel, tōtara, and the use of light visible through the traditional kōwhaiwhai patterns, capturing the story of Tāwhaki as he ascends to the heavens above. He's beckoning us on our journeys, and it feels quite natural that this narrative was gifted to the library. The final piece of the narrative that I want to highlight is Rau Whakapapa, which is an installation made of harakeke or flax, shells, and bird feathers. The artwork elevates the significance of these natural resources, including cultural values, material knowledge, and technologies. Looking closely, the netted structure of the harakeke flax fibre is an emblem of relational connections where cultural knowledge is linked and passed on. The shells included in the artwork reference again the importance of making a kai. And ideas of coming together to eat and share food. The shells included in the artwork reference again the importance of making a kai, food gathering practices, and ideas of coming together to eat and share food. The feathers are also a symbol of these practices, as they are the same feathers of the birds that are depicted in the artwork in the lift surrounds. This work also sits on the same floor as the Ngā Pounamu Māori collection, which includes a lot of important collection items for Ngāitua Huriri. Its presence in this area, again, is a reminder of the narratives and how these artworks are integrated. An integrated design hold dual purpose of visually communicating traditional knowledge that is reclaiming some space in the public area, while seamlessly contributing to the overall look and feel of the building, which often is very European in nature. So that is tūranga. However, to get us here was a true experience of partnership and co-design that the council took on. And to say this process was an easy one is far from the truth. And often it must have felt like there was no way of completing this. However, tūranga now stands as a reminder, as a symbol and as a treasure for both Ngāitua Huriri and the council to remember that there is a partnership and that authorship of the city is for both of us to contribute to. I'd just like to share some learnings with you now, as I would feel I didn't do the team and the work justice if I hadn't shared those with you. So here they are. Cultural competency. At the beginning of the project, there wasn't a lot to start with from the council team. This meant that when engaging with Ngāitua Huriri around the design and especially the collaborative aspects of it with leaders and designers and artists, the risk of misunderstanding and miscommunication was really high. It then meant that Māori staff internally compensated by delivering training and professional development. This required time, energy, and a skill set dedicated to this upskilling, so factoring this in at the beginning is really important. Relationships built on trust. This is hugely important, and probably this is more of a reminder to those engaging with mana whenua and Indigenous people that you can't expect to achieve much if your partner doesn't trust you. Ways to build trust or display ability to build trust are ensure that there are many opportunities for key people to meet one another as many times as it takes before getting stuck into the detail. Communicate with your partners often. They need to be involved and be walking alongside the process the whole time. Be considerate and understanding around their timelines and deadlines, as often cultural advisors will need to take things back to share through their channels, and this can take time, as again, not all cultural groups are resourced to support this work, so it will need to happen when their capacity allows. First means first. Again, around the timeline, when our Indigenous partners are asking to be engaged with first, then that is what they mean. Often it is before the project brief or even before the partnership needs to become formal. There should be a relationship established. This means that when the first murmurings of a project happen, cultural advice can be sought, and then project timelines can reflect a realistic way forward with you and your partner. Artist collaboration. What I heard was that a highlight of the project was not only watching the artist's vision come to life, but to be involved in aspects where it was appropriate. For tūranga, the artists who created Rau Whakapapa, the woven harakeke flax artwork, saw this as an important aspect of the work, so invited the project team to help gather, prepare, and learn about the materials required and some of the traditional knowledge held within these practices. And finally, the impact for Ngāi Huriri cannot be understated. This is the most important part at the whānau or the family level. The true measure for success for tūranga is whether it is providing and delivering for its people, Ngāi Huriri. You have to stop and remember that before tūranga, the other buildings that were in the front end of the construction post-quake, Ngāi Huriri were not present in the built environment of Christchurch. Their story was not being told by them in ways that gave life to their identity and tradition. So I can only imagine how affirming it must be for whānau families to see their stories taking centre stage. To this day, I get comments from Ngāi Huriri people and Ngāi Tahu people in general about how special tūranga is, because it is for them, about them. That is the true value of tūranga. I hope this has been helpful, and I have only touched lightly on aspects of tūranga's cultural narrative and design elements that are important. I hope we get to see more buildings that reflect a commitment to retelling stories that have always been here, but not necessarily heard or seen before. I hope to see more buildings that reflect their physical and cultural landscape. I hope to see more buildings that are a commitment to partnership and co-design models, as that is a rewarding process in itself. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka kite.
Thank you very much to Maya, and I'm sorry that he's not here to take any of your questions, but I'm sure if you wanted to send him an email or if you wanted to ask us to send him some questions, he would be delighted to answer them. So we've sort of come full circle, and it's lovely that we can come back to Australia to finish off today. And it's my great pleasure to introduce a long-standing colleague and friend, Jeanette Burke. Of relevance today is her involvement earlier on in the planning and operation of several major library projects while she was in University Library. And more recently, Jeanette has translated that experience to her current role at the University of Tasmania, where her recent project at Inveresk in the north of Tasmania is, in my opinion, one of the most sincere and refreshing new projects in the university library space. Please welcome Jeanette Burke to talk about sharing our stories and spaces connecting with our Indigenous community. Welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you. Yapalingana, welcome. I actually feel like a bit of an imposter standing here today, given with the breadth and depth of those people who have presented today. So I apologise now for any misuse of terminology, culture, and I'm still learning. So I'll start off with the acknowledgement to Palawa and Pakana peoples of Lutruwita, the traditional owners of the land on which I live and work and which the Inveresk Library is based. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, but most importantly, I want to acknowledge the Aboriginal community for sharing their stories, knowledges and countries with us. It has been a learning journey for us all. I want to acknowledge Caleb Nichols-Mansell, a proud Tasmanian Aboriginal artist whose work is featured throughout this presentation and has brought a little bit of country and knowledge into this library. Sorry, I should have started. I'm just pushing the button. There we go. So the library building and the university grounds have been designed with over 150 community members, and groups were consulted, and it was really important to honour the land that we were situated on. The Tasmanian Aboriginal Reference Group was established with a key focus to embed the Tasmanian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' presence on this campus and successfully develop our knowledges of country philosophy for which we built this campus. And it was also about establishing a knowledge and narration around the Riawana Cultural Centre for our students and culturally significant parts of the landscape. The same group that helped design this urban realm also helped us co-design the processes of the library. And our theme for this library is Ways of Knowing. So the outdoor area represents the site's past, present and future. So Palingani Militha Indigenous Outdoor Welcoming Space, which we now call the urban realm. And it was really important for this to be the heart of the campus next to the library. The library building itself also emulates the sawtooth roof lines of the old tram sheds there, but also it was really important for me to bring in country into this building. And that was something that we worked really strongly on doing in this. The important feature of this is that the guardian stones were bought from the Newnham campus to protect this precinct, but also interestingly, we decided to keep David Hamilton's work, The Bolt, it's just called Bolt actually, and we rejuvenated that piece of sculpture, and it was his celebration of Launceston City, the European settlement, but also an acknowledgement of the 35,000 years of the local Aboriginal settlement. So it is an interesting juxtaposition to have those two so closely aligned. For me, it was really important to have a welcoming space and to acknowledge and have something that was specifically dedicated to the Aboriginal story. So we commissioned 8 Aboriginal voices on a video that is permanently rotated through the visual screen. They're from 8 local community members. It's about their stories, their country and their culture. There was a high level engagement with this because we did this in consultation with Riawana. And it's been a privilege to be part of building this space, which has been dedicated to the Aboriginal stories and collections that we have, and for them to impart their knowledges and culture with us as well. The design of the case was actually done by John Wardle himself and was built with a significant piece of fallen Huon pine as the base of the display. But what's important is that there are 3 respected elder makers who are sharing their knowledge with younger generations that we've now conserved through our University Fine Art Cultural Collection, and that was the sharing of how to make shell necklaces of the mariner shells. So we've conserved them, but also more importantly too is that we curated this display with the Aboriginal community. So it was about our curators learning about the importance of what can sit next to each other, what things can you put in the case together that is not going to upset the community. So our director, Kane Shanat, our curatorial and cultural collections director, did this directly in collaboration with community. And also Kane's been responsible for commissioning the artworks across all of our new buildings. And the artwork's been funded by the university's New Art in Buildings Fund. But I think to Annie's point earlier this morning, everything we've done in this building has been purposely designed from the onset. So we haven't slapped up art after the fact. We knew every wall in that building and where art was going to be placed and what that art was going to tell us and the stories it was telling. And also, interestingly, to understand the juxtaposition of having Western art in these formats, in digital format, in print format, in object format, alongside Aboriginal art. One of the great things that we've been able to do on this floor is do object-based learning. So we've been able to use the objects in situ. So we've taken Rex Greeno's canoe from the display case, sat it on the table, and students have been able to come in and do an art lesson. We've also really tried to consider how those objects can be used not just for artwork. So Rex's canoe has been digitised into a 3D model embedded into an Aboriginal health unit, and has also been used in an architect unit. So really thinking outside the box around how we can bring culture into our curriculum. We also host a lot of community events in this floor. We have high school students come in here. We've had a car in this floor. We've had a piano in this floor. And so it's really important that we've been able to have all of these different events and objects and exhibitions within this space, which is very flexible. Slide. So part of this was ensuring that our art was based on ways of knowing, and we wanted to integrate our local Tasmanian art alongside different other representations of art. And we wanted to do that in a respectful way. So what we did is we did a really transparent commissioning process. It ensured that we had all of the stakeholders who were co-located in that building on the committee. We ensured that we had someone who had the cultural authority to help us decide which Tasmanian artists we should create or employ to do this. We had Wardle, so the architects, and we also outsourced the commissioning process to a local company, Arts Tasmania. It took a long time, so please don't underestimate the time it takes to get agreement on what art should be selected. We were very lucky to have, at the time, Caleb Nichols-Mansell, who was an emerging Palawa artist. He was foremost a digital artist, and it was a great learning experience for him. So this was part of mentoring him in his art to work with architects, to work at scale. So he took his drawings from an iPad basically and created 15 meters of carpet. And it was really important for him not to have the pattern replicated as most carpets are, to have a unique pattern across those carpets. And this carpet in particular, the story goes across 3 levels. This represents Kanamaluka Tamar River, the beginning of that Tamar River when it was green and it was fresh, and the reeds were used for basket weaving to encourage natural bird life into this river. And so it's bringing country and that story into this river. But I also think one of the really important things, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here with Caleb, is that I think it's had a profound effect on him and his connection to the university as well. And I'd like you to hear some of his story.
The importance of having Kanamaluka the kind of focal point of these artworks and the thought process behind the concept relates back to the university's vision of being a place-based organisation or a place-based university. When I got the commission and when I was exploring concepts and ideas behind what they could potentially be, it was really important that I brought the Kanamaluka or the river from just outside into the campus and told the story of Kanamaluka, how it supported our old people, how it still connects and supports our community today, and the cultural practices that we used to practice around the Kanamaluka. I've taken the colours, the lines and the natural abstract forms of Kanamaluka and interpreted that into an artwork that represents Kanamaluka in its natural form, but also touches on the impact that humans have had on this precious waterway. Seeing people appreciate and understand that the concepts and ideas that underpin the design of each of the carpets is really important to me as an artist. It means that I've been successful in what I've wanted to achieve, which is telling story of country, community and culture my brothers and my sisters will eventually come through this university, and it's really inspiring for me to be able to see our presence, our culture, our community so visible. My brothers and sisters have come down and seen the carpet, so they're not even at the age to study at university, but they've already entered the university and been part of this environment. And that's more than I ever had when I was a kid. So I really hope that it translates through to that younger generation and they see this as a commitment from the university, but also from the Aboriginal community, that they'll be supported and they'll be valued while they study at UTAS.
Always makes me feel very emotional watching that. And I think one of the really important takeaways from me is I've learned a lot from this. And this is one area that I'm going to have to redo it after listening to some speakers at call last week. So this rug depicts the strength and the beauty of women who use the Kanamaluka for their resources. So the lines are strong, the colour is beautiful. There's beautiful windows out to the vista of the country and to Kanamaluka. But also, interestingly enough, this is our Riawana Aboriginal collection. And, you know, hindsight's a great thing. What was I thinking when we put this in and we classified it using Library of Congress? So really now I want to bring community back in here and say, disorganise this collection, organise it in a way that it is meaningful and purpose to you, if that's through a different theme of country, how you would use it, because we are not getting the Aboriginal community coming in to use these spaces that we built with them and for them. So I think I've got a lot of work to continue that connection. You can't just pick it up and think they'll come and go, well, you've been in the co-design process. Here it is, it's your space, off you go. So there's a lot of work and commitment that sits behind this. And also we've been able to bring in the cultural collections into this space, and this was really important for me. And I'm really aware of time. This is my favourite floor. This is Kanamaluka. There's 3 rugs together here, but it is depicting the slow demise of Kanamaluka. So you can see the black lines that are starting to come into this carpet. That's starting to represent the silt, the human interference that is happening at Kanamaluka. And if anyone has been to Launceston recently, there's signs all over the place that says fix the mud, because the silt build-up in the river is starting to destroy it. And I also think that it's really beautiful that we've been able to retain our print collection. Our electronic collection sits here, but we also have a Western artist in the background as well. And just finally on this last carpet, there are no reeds in this carpet. They have gone, and this is not what we want our river to become. So I think this is a really strong story that has got across to a lot of our students and our staff, and we are starting to appreciate what it means to look after country. You can also see that we have glass cases there. These get changed regularly. We outsource them, so they get a commissioning process for local organisations to come in and use those cases. We have high school students who do displays in those cases. So it's not always about putting Western objects in there, but we've actually really used them as an education purpose as well. So one of the beautiful pieces of art here is Troy Ruffles' weathering, and this was his interpretation, so a Western interpretation of what Northern Tasmania means to him, and his narration around what the waterways, the mountains and foliage. And so Troy's work is in response to how individuals and community weather adversity, linking to climate and environment. It's on 9 aluminium panels. It should have been 10. And these are the little things that happens when design slips through. There's a security camera that's on the wall where the 10th panel should have been. So we'll have to fix that as well. So, you know, you have to be buried in the detail when you're designing new buildings. But I think it's a really beautiful way of showcasing everybody's interpretation of country, not just one culture of interpreting country. And it's also being able to have our local artists work together as a community. And we're just in the process of commissioning a hanging sculpture for the void. And as I said, you know, finding someone with cultural authority is really challenging within a diverse Aboriginal community. So this is going to be a kelp hanging sculpture. So we had to understand where kelp could be collected from, how it could be processed and how it could be hung. And with those local Aboriginal artists to work with engineers around the scale of building such a sculpture and actually hanging it safely in this void. And I think for me, it's also not about what I like. So I didn't particularly like the colours of some of the signage, but that was the ochre of the river. So everything that Wardle did was really purposely thought through, from the colours that represented landscape and river, from the patterns in the fabric. So there's some beautiful botanical fabrics that were purposely drawn and designed to represent country. Also making sure that we had sustainability, durability in our building, but also wayfinding. So the materiality in the building also helps with vision impaired people walking through on a brick pathway to a timber pathway to rugs as well. So that was really important to us. And I think for me, the key outcome of this design process is that it's welcoming. We wanted to showcase print, electronic and cultural collections in the one building, but purposefully bring them together and integrate them. Engaging with community, because it was after all about them, and continuing to engage with our emerging artists and artists from schools, universities. How can we add value to the events and what's happening in that building? So library and cultural collections are always intimately involved with every event, and we try and add some value in some way to all of those events. And I think we've done a really good job of doing a really purposeful, place-based and distinctive building. And it's connected much more strongly with our Riawana collection and our staff. It's been driven by a Vice-Chancellor who's really passionate about this space. So that really helps when you have senior leaders who really believe in bringing in the Aboriginal community to help design and build a building. So I've learned a lot, and I think it's been a privileged journey that I've had and my staff have had in deepening our understanding about country, cultural authority, and the interpretation and the sharing of knowledge that this building has brought to us. So thank you. Oh, and I'm just not, the thing's not moving. Anyway, it's the last slide. It's,
Do we have any questions for Jeanette? Yes, David. We're just bringing a mic at the moment. Thank you.
Just you mentioned that it's a long process to do this. Going back, what would you wish you'd done? What would you wish you've done earlier that you would do next time?
I wish we'd started to engage community much earlier. I think I underestimated, like I always do, I'll build this in a day and I'll get everyone on side in a day. And the commissioning process takes a long time from concept design to actually making it happen. Those carpets were made in the US in COVID, and so they took ages to ship across. We didn't have the samples in time. And so I think involving community and getting everyone on side, and actually the cultural change that you need, even for your library staff, start that before you're building, not during and after. So I think that's really important.
Well, we might draw this session to an end. Janet Fletcher is the Secretary of Library Buildings and Equipment. And again, Janet's been a colleague for a very long time. And we asked her a very hard thing to do, but she is the secretary of our committee and she keeps us very organised. We asked her to just keep her eyes and ears open throughout today and to make a few comments at the end of today about what she thought we've covered. A really, really hard ask, but over to Janet.
Lesson learned, don't be friends with Philip. Hello, everyone. Yes, we're at the end of the day, so I'm going to try to be very quick. One thing about our section is that we have always had, as well as our library staff, we work with architects. So we have architects on our committee. And that brings such a richness to our conversations throughout the year, and also when we run these types of sessions. And so listening to Annie this morning was, oh my God, now I'm going to break into tears. It was just fantastic listening to you. And then Chris later on, you know, saying the same things, and Shannon also reflecting the things that you said this morning. And so it's the importance of thoughtful design that reflects local culture. It's about craft, valuing the environment, using local resources, respecting heritage, and keeping the collective memory of our communities. I'm not normally this emotional. Work with the First Nations people to build a place that can only belong where it is. Listen to Jeanette, you know, that could only be there. The places in China and so on could only be where they were built. They couldn't be anywhere else. And how many times have you gone to a hotel and went, I could be in New York or Berlin or wherever, but these buildings are so significant, and they don't have to be grand buildings. They could be quite humble buildings, which is pretty incredible. Dorothea talked about sustainability goals and that tension between these heritage buildings and then trying to weave sustainability into these buildings. And we were talking about it yesterday, that this work never stops. You know, you don't build a building and then go away and say we've done the work. It's never ending. You know, Margie was talking about that yesterday, about constantly improving what we're doing. And the library as a jewel box, I quite like that. But then we started talking about lanes and promenades and natural light, and how it was so important to get those features into our libraries, and that the storage facilities are great caverns that somehow we've got to make sustainable. These are big challenges. And then for Foster, the libraries are transcendent and they're a container for people. And again, it's that library 5.5 was that integration with nature, and how that's a common theme throughout the day. The rocks, the water, the vegetation, pathways again, light, movement, ventilation, materials, all the things that we need to consider when we're renovating or building new buildings. And that Shanghai Library East that floats amongst the trees. And then Shannon brought in that real passion around country. And I loved how she said that the trees will create the classroom for you if we'd only let them, and that everything is connected. I was actually going to make you do an activity, but we haven't got time about connection. But we are all country. And I love the let it all be green, and then we have grey pathways. And I thought, oh, what a brilliant way of thinking about things. And then, of course, Kim is our Maori values, that Maori values are interwoven in everything that we do in Aotearoa. I say we because I've just come from New Zealand. But wasn't it lovely that this region was very reflected in a lot of what was said today? And I know, because I've been to Tauranga, and I went to my former boss and I said, if you don't, when she went to Christchurch, if you don't go there, I'll be really angry when you get back to Wellington. And she said, I went twice, Janet. And she loved it. I took my mother-in-law. It was fantastic. And so Taranga talked about the stories narrative, and that came through with Jeanette as well, and that the relationships are built on trust, and first means first. How simple these things are, but how important and valuable that they are. And that you got to disorganize this collection. Good luck, Jeanette. But that we really want it to be welcoming, engaging, and continuing engagement. Again, it doesn't stop. It goes on and on. So thank you very much. I hope that summarises our session today, but I'm overwhelmed, I have to say.
Thank you very much, Janet. And now to close the proceedings, our chair of IFLA LBS, Marion Morgan-Binden.
Thank you, everyone. As Janet has summed up, over the course of today, we've all had the opportunity to explore and discuss building excellence. We've experienced a smorgasbord for the mind, let alone all the food, but hearing the various projects from an inspiring lineup of speakers. We've had the opportunity to dissect and discuss, and we've seen very, very strong evidence that our libraries are accepting that responsibility as agents of social change. Nothing is more important than country. Thank you to you, the audience, for your participation and enthusiasm. And to our incredible presenters, you have shared personal stories, you have inspired and created a delightful buzz throughout all the breaks. I think we have all really deepened our understanding of country. I also want to thank particularly the person who raised the question about how do you do acknowledgement of country, and that's something that I will take away, as you noticed from the start of this morning. To our sponsors, the University of Sydney Library, Shellharbour Library, City Libraries, Belinda, Civica, Solus, Bezi, Resource Furniture, Biblioteca, and the State Library of New South Wales. We value your contribution and the faith that you have demonstrated by sponsoring this event. We wanted to provide an experience for our international colleagues, but equally share the stories that our region has been able to deliver. And I know that the program committee has achieved this. And I might just ask Margie and Philip to please come forward. These events just don't happen, and they haven't been possible without the hard work, dedication, and inspiration of our hosts. Philip, supported by the University of Sydney team who are here, Sylvia and Julia and a number of staff. It has just been an incredible team effort, and many of Philip's team aren't here. Margie, with the support of her directors, her library staff, her whole team at Shellharbour Libraries. This has just been extraordinary and has contributed significantly to the success of this event. So on behalf of the whole library, the IFLA Library Buildings and Equipment section, a very warm thank you to you both and from everyone here. Would you please begin? That's been absolutely wonderful.